Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. I'm your host, Escalante TV. Now, if you're a recurring subscriber or recurring viewer, you'll probably know me for covering certain topics on this channel. Now, one of the topics that I don't cover too often is history. Now, I'm somewhat of a historian myself, and I like to watch alternate history. And alternate history is pretty interesting because it asks a lot of what ifs. And I've seen a lot of what ifs, like what if the US didn't win World War II? What if the Allies lost to the Nazis or the Axis? And what if JFK was never assassinated? And yeah, I've watched the miniseries 11/22/63, and I've watched the Man in the High Castle series. Those are interesting shows to watch. Those are pretty fun shows to watch on the respective streaming platforms. But I want to say that alternate history sometimes takes a few creative liberties. Like The Man in the High Castle takes the creative liberties of like dimension travel, alternate history films leaking into other universes, and all this science fiction in the 1960s. And with 11/22/63, there's time travel involved to fix things and see an alternate history. But here, I discovered a mini-series recently. I just got access to HBO Max to watch this series over the 4th of July weekend. So The Plot Against America is pretty much a live-action series based on the book by Philip Roth, and which was published around 2004. And it pretty much explores the question of what if the United States decided to basically stay isolationist and not get involved with World War II, but also struggle with sort of the rising idea of fascism and anti-Semitism in the United States. So we're pretty much put into this alternate 1940 to 1942, where this working class Jewish family pretty much starts to experience the rapid changes that are happening in their world, and they're seeing like this new president being elected that's super like is like a super closet Nazi, and that is Charles Lindbergh. So Charles Lindbergh was a real person. He was an American aviator, sort of like a celebrity during the time. People knew who he was, and he was a closet Nazi. He was he did like express his feelings of sort of sympathy like towards like the Nazi ideals, fascist ideals, and around this time before the war, fascism was a real fear. In our timeline and in the alternate timeline, fascism in the 30s was sort of like in people's heads. In the back of their heads, people were still scared of communists, sort of building onto the future Cold War fears. But fascism was on the rise in Europe with Nazi Germany and fascism in Italy, as well as, well, we don't really consider it fascism, but the Japanese Empire was pretty much committing atrocities in China, but that wouldn't be really known until after the Holocaust. So, thinking about it in retrospect, a lot of people now sort of support, the idea of America getting involved in the war. But back then, people did not want to get involved in another European war after they saw what happened in World War I. So during this time, a lot of people did not see this as a just war until after Pearl Harbor, until actually people cared and actually they now saw how evil these regimes were. So Charles Lindbergh in this series is pretty much like a figurehead that opposes FDR in the 1940 election, and Lindbergh wins. Lindbergh in our timeline, I don't think he was close to opposing FDR, unlike Wilkie, I think. But FDR won by a landslide because he saw the rising threat in Europe, and pretty much Britain and France were getting destroyed. Like Nazi Germany was pretty much destroying the allies that were fighting in Europe at the time. And pretty much in this alternate 1940 to 42, pretty much Britain is all alone in North Africa fighting in the desert in small skirmishes, while the Soviet Union is pretty much taking the charge in Europe. And I also want to touch this question as well, what would happen to Europe? Like, will we see like a completely communist Europe if it was just the Soviet Union against the Nazis? So this show doesn't exactly like focus too much on like important historical figures as much, but it does like, you know, incorporate large historical events around this Jewish family that lives in New Jersey, and they're experiencing all these changes in their lives, and it's pretty much impacting them. And this show is kind of like psychologically scary, kind of, if you're really into politics and how politics will eventually affect your life, because this Jewish family is like really living in fear. And I felt those tense moments of whether like this Jewish family felt safe while all this violence against Jews was happening all throughout the show. And there was this big Kristallnacht. If you guys don't know what Kristallnacht was pretty much a night, I believe in 1938, where a bunch of Nazis went wild out on the streets of Germany and basically wrecked Jewish homes. They destroyed businesses, they beat up people, and they pretty much, they unleashed all their anger towards Jews on that one night and hurt a lot of people. This is sort of like pre-Holocaust, but it's kind of scary that it happened in this kind of pretty sort of believable alternate universe, alternate reality. I don't know if it's like realistic, but it almost seems like it, because I'm going to tell you right now, during the late 30s, there were Nazi sympathizers in the U.S. If you guys look up Madison Square Garden Nazi rally, it's kind of a big yikes that, you know, this big Nazi rally happened in America, and there were racists among us. No pun intended, okay? Yeah, there were closeted racists, closeted Nazis in America ready to sympathize with the Nazi cause, and it's kind of scary that in this alternate reality we see them unleashed. You know, what would happen if they were given the means to basically be unleashed on the poor Jewish population. And it's kind of crazy to think America not being involved now that we see our own universe, because America gets involved in almost everything now. And we see World War II as a very just event for America's involvement. But back then, very different thoughts in people's heads. You know, now we see them as pretty dangerous thoughts. You know, we see the dangerous thoughts of like racism and Nazism and fascism. And those are very objectively evil things. But the show doesn't really cover anything beyond 1942. It kind of just covers 1940 to 42. And at the end of the show, it's kind of surprising that, you know, I think they want FDR back. So yeah, there's like a big election that kind of hangs on the balance, and it kind of ends on a cliffhanger, and nobody knows what happens from there. I guess we assume FDR gets reelected again, leads the country from 1942 on. Maybe World War II didn't become America's problem at all in the Cold War either. So yeah, World War II was a big impact on our history, on American history, on world history, and how America is seen today. So I'm kind of glad we live in this timeline. You know, everybody's kind of grinding their teeth that and kind of angry that they live in this horrible timeline. But you know, all these alternate history shows and all this alternate history media kind of makes you appreciate the time you live in, because it was a nightmare scenario, you know, kind of tense. So I do recommend you go watch The Plot Against America if you haven't. It kind of gets overshadowed by some other shows, but 6 episodes, it's not that long, but still it kind of just feels like a breath of fresh air to watch this alternate history media without all this science fiction stuff and all this time travel stuff. It kind of just happens within its own universe, and we see the events play out, so that's kind of nice. So yeah, guys, make sure to go check out Plot Against America if you have HBO Max. It was a really good watch for me. The Man in the High Castle is a pretty good watch if you're into alternate history, sci-fi, dimension travel stuff, alternate history films. 11/22/63 is also good if you're into like the JFK assassination. So yeah, guys, Hope you guys did enjoy this video expose. Like this video if you like it. Subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.